welcome to the Inviting Shift podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. This is the Midlife Woman's podcast for a confident and joyful journey. I'm your host, Christina Smith, and twice a week I'll be bringing you topics that impact midlife women the most. I hear it from my clients. They have health concerns around perimenopause and menopause. We have mental and emotional challenges going on that I want to help you manage and work through. I want to talk about how we deepen our relationships and our friendships in midlife, and then what we do when we want more, how we get clear on that, and how we start moving forward confidently and joyfully, because that's what this journey is about. I want midlife women to come together, create a community to revolutionize how we see midlife. Tune in for this week's topic. Well, welcome back, shifters. This week, I am so excited about this conversation is about our midlife body. Now, I know that our bodies are changing in ways probably that we have never, ever experienced before. And we're like, what is going on? For me, it's like, what's going on with my belly? And lately, the joints on the right side of my body. And what is happening here? So I don't know much about that. But we have an expert here, Janis Isaman, who is going to be able to help us understand our body, what's important for us to be doing, and a lot of other juicy stuff. We already had a conversation, probably should have recorded it because it was really lovely. So thank you, Janis, so much for being here today.
I'm really, really excited to be speaking to you again.
Yes, me too. And tell us a little bit about who you are.
I am a member of your age cohort, so I'm presenting that because I live the experience as well, where my body's shifting. I mean, I think our bodies are always shifting, but there is definitely parts of being middle-aged that look different than being a different age group. And I'm by trade a movement specialist, so I help people feel better in their bodies. So most of the time what triggers people to come see me is that they're in pain. That does again link to kind of our age group, where we often tell people that living in pain and discomfort is just part of, what you have to live with and what you have to accept. So the issue of our body appearance and our body function is really baked into my work, because I have a lot of people that come in because their knee hurts or their back hurts or they have sciatica. But then we move very quickly into, my belly is saggy, my thighs are floppy, and there's kind of all of this negative self-talk about the skin and the appearance of the body. And we have to work with that emotionally, intellectually, because our bodies are not 20, they're not 15, and they never will be again. And so there's a huge psychological component to the middle-aged body quite often in women. It is actually a period where we often have a spike in eating disorders and body dysmorphia. So this is really a huge part of the conversation that needs to be had with every middle-aged person, especially women.
I love how you said that, because all those symptoms, the shifting of our body and the way that our hormones are shifting and what's happening in our bodies, it's really similar to adolescence, right? I mean, we have this huge shift in our body in adolescence. And I love that sometimes people call, midlife the second adolescence. So that's almost what we're going through. So what I'm hearing is, sure, it's okay to have some discomfort in midlife, because even in adolescence, I don't know about you, but every time I think about puberty, my armpits start sweating and I get a little nauseous. But with all of that, discomfort is normal, but the pain doesn't have to be, is what I'm hearing.
100%. So I kind of hear two different narrative streams. One is our classic fitness marketing, where we go on Instagram and it's like, you just have to cut calories and increase your exercise, and then you're going to, in 21 days, quote unquote, transform your body. And so I see a whole subset of women in particular who are actually what I would call on the wagon, off the wagon. So we get kind of that binge mentality where we say, okay, I get people who literally have never run a day in their life, and they're like, I've decided to train for a half marathon. And then they, come up with these elaborate schemes and plans about how they're going to not eat any more sugar for the rest of their life, but don't worry, it's a lifestyle. And then, just this massive spike in exercise and activity that actually doesn't fit quite often into the middle-aged lifestyle, where we're juggling homes and caretaking of, both generations on both sides, etc. So, where are you even finding the time for this? But then the second kind of group of people, it's the give up mentality. And I actually have received a lot of messaging, even with what I do. And I'm like, whoa, you just have to accept that that's perimenopause. You accept that your hormones are shifting. You accept that you're going to be, aching and creaking and squeaking for the rest of your life. And neither of those are true, but I noticed that we really kind of have this dichotomy where it's one or the other. And there isn't a lot in the middle that says, okay, yeah, our skin is going to change. Maybe some of the muscle tone will shift slightly, but here are the things that you can do. And let's do it in a way that the target isn't to look like a 20-year-old, because 60-year-olds don't look like 20-year-olds and 50-year-olds don't look like 20-year-olds, but also not in a way where we're like, you're just going to have to accept it and live like that, because neither of those things are true. So we actually have this real gap in the market where we have solutions that are actually practical, real, where we actually talk about the actual bone and muscle and tissue shift that's happening. And then, one of my favorite things to say to people is, behind every aesthetic concern is a functional concern. So when we come in and we say, oh, my belly feels disgusting, actually what you're feeling is a bit of loss of muscle tone. So if we can actually get a bit of muscle tone there, 99% of the time, kind of that aesthetic concern goes away, because it's actually about what we're physically feeling. So we don't have those conversations where we're teaching women, okay, the pelvis actually shifts. Your hyaluronic acid, which is a substance that attracts and retains water, is now half of what it was in your 20s. So you might feel, you're not feeling dry, but what you're noticing is that your skin is a little bit more crepey. So what do we do about that? So that conversation really, actually, honestly, doesn't exist anywhere.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is, out there, and I witness this all the time. I mean, even outside of our health, like, there's also healing and, all these other things. And it's like all or nothing. Like, you
Yes.
either have to become this brand new person overnight,
Yeah.
or you just and it's even more than accepting. It's like settling, right? It's
Yes.
like, well, and not only have I accepted this, but I'm just going to settle into it and therefore continue the same habits that kind of got me where I am, and just going to make it worse, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you're, in the middle, because I think that that's how all of our growth happens, no matter what habit that is, right? It does become a lifestyle, but like, even me, who I had gut issues in my 30s, I had to change things, but it's not like I could, like, suddenly one day, it wasn't easy for me anyway, one day to be like, no dairy, no grain, and, do all of this exercise. I mean, that just didn't happen overnight. And I love when people do that for, like, New Year's resolutions. Like, I'm going to train for a marathon, even though I hate running and I've never done it before and I eat all kinds of crap. But tomorrow I'm going to wake up being the person who
Yes.
wants to run.
Yes.
And I have
Absolutely.
actually tried that, so I'm guilty there. I've done it, like, I've done like 5, couch to 5K programs. And what I got after that was, I hate running. Can I do something different?
I think we're all guilty of it because we get served up so much marketing. And I think it often doesn't even look like marketing to our eyeballs, because it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook. We have a ton of, it's influencers and coaches and people who honestly, I do believe that they have people's best intentions in mind, and I don't think anybody's setting out to kind of trick you. But it is very compelling. I can say as a business owner, I don't do it, but it actually takes effort to not do it, because it's very compelling to just post those before and after pictures or tell that kind of really first percentile story that isn't an average story. The message of go for a walk, spend some time outside, connect with others, take some supplements, it's boring. It's really boring. Whereas I can say, oh, here's my 21-day program that created this dramatic result. In the meantime, I'm not mentioning I didn't eat and I was starving and I was bitchy, and I can't sustain that. That messaging will get likes, it'll get clicks, it'll get interest, it'll get people kind of inquiring. And so I think that we kind of have a system that encourages people to subtly create that messaging for people. And then as a consumer, it's really hard to be on these platforms, or, that includes reading a magazine, watching television, and kind of see all of these bodies everywhere and see this promise of magic and not fall prey to it mentally, intellectually, physically, monetarily, etc. I've done it and I know better. I do this for a living, and I still can really catch my brain going into these little, like, oh, tomorrow I'll just stop eating sugar for the rest of my life.
You can't even say it with a straight face.
Right. And so I think that, that's an important thing to mention, because I think that we can feel shame about actually, we don't use the word diet anymore. That word went passe a number of years ago. We use lifestyle. So we're kind of finding these cliches to pretend that they're not diets and extreme exercise programs, when what we're actually feeling is this desperate sense of, I don't know what to do. And it's really because we're being hit with it from every angle. I probably get, in some form or another, literally hundreds of messages about bodies every day. And that could be as innocuous as, I have a magazine on my coffee table in front of me right now. I open it up and it's the marketing imagery of the really sexy, tight skinned, wrinkle free body, because the model is airbrushed and she's a model and she's 22 years old. And so nothing in that ad might say, hey, this is a diet and fitness or a lifestyle and nutrition program. But that messaging is still hitting my brain as middle age or older is not, it's not sexy, it's not desirable, it's not aspirational. So I think it's everywhere, and it's really easy for us to kind of fall into that hole where we just say, okay, the solution has to be to do this extreme thing.
Yeah. And then what happens, though, what I have found happens with my clients is they try to do these extreme things, one after another, maybe after another. And then they get to this other opposite point where it's like, I've tried it all. Like this doesn't work. There's no way, right, that I can. So it's almost discouraging when we see these like really shiny, sleek, sexy bodies, and we're like, you can do that in 21 days. I mean,
Yeah.
doesn't it depend on where we're starting from, first of all, not only physically, but mentally? I mean, that takes a lot of mental endurance. I've had clients who do the 75 hard, and I mean, it's just so daunting that that's not really how we make a lifestyle change. I know for my clients and what I do with them, it's always small shifts. It's not like they come and meet with me and the next week their wounded child is healed. You know what I mean? Like,
I
or
wish, right?
those issues never come up again, right? I mean, it's just like, it's not a magic wand, unfortunately, but it is what I'm hearing. And I believe that you do as well, is like, it's a lot of little changes,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
lot of tiny shifts. So is that how you work with women when they come in?
I do a couple of things. One is I do offer education pieces. So I kind of referenced a couple of those items earlier, but an example that's really concrete is if you think about the bones in your pelvis, which almost none of us have ever thought about, PS, but the bones have an angle. So usually the top part of the bone is a little bit wider than the bottom part in a female body. And as we age, that angle actually increases so that
Mm-hmm.
the bottom of the pelvis will typically pull in a little bit more and the top will come out a little bit more. Most women have never heard this information before. It's part of what your eyeballs are looking at when you look at a woman like Jennifer Aniston, who's obviously incredibly fit. She obviously puts a lot of time and energy and money into her body maintenance. But you could look at her from the backside and realize that she's not a 22-year-old woman. And that's not a criticism of her in any way. But what your eyeballs are subconsciously processing that tiny shift and that tiny biological signaling that she is not a 22-year-old. She's older than that. And so there are pieces of the body. That is actually an example where I've actually found that sharing that with clients gives women quite often kind of that, I can let go of that. My pelvis has shifted. Perhaps my pant size went up. That's not going to change because that's not your body fat. You're never going to diet and exercise your way out of that. Your bones actually speak your age. That's it. So we can't make a shift in that. So I start with kind of some of those pieces of education of what is shifting. Another one that I actually referenced earlier, but I'll kind of flesh out. We have a substance in our body called hyaluronic acid. It actually appears in a lot of beauty products these days because it attracts and retains 1,000 times its body weight in water. If you look at a child who's like 9, 10, 11, their skin kind of glows. It's actually because they have a ton of hyaluronic acid. It's giving that hydration. That's part of why there's no wrinkles in children. They also have, really high collagen. So you can actually supplement, I do, with hyaluronic acid because we have, I can't remember what the exact number is, but you have half or less at age 40 as you do when you're 20. So that's something that actually, think about your elasticity. That's when we talk about flexibility. When you have no water in your tissues, you're going to feel dry. You're going to look crepey. You're going to have wrinkles. You're going to feel tight. So it's both an aesthetic thing and a functional thing. But again, nature kind of baked that in where there are those signals of this is a young person, this is an old person. Even supplementing with hyaluronic acid, I don't look like I'm 22. so it doesn't quote unquote solve it. There's no kind of binary like this fixes it. It's a miracle, but it does make my tissues. I live in Canada where it's cold here. And so as soon as it gets cold, I notice that there is kind of that like, like my spine doesn't feel great. And that's really for me what the hyaluronic acid is actually doing. It's giving that hydration to my tissues so that every time the weather changes, my body isn't like, hey, stop. So that's a small change that most of us could do, provided that we can afford it. You can buy a bottle of hyaluronic acid tablets and start taking them in the morning. That's not an extreme change. That's nothing that's going to, you're not in this big cycle. So that isn't, that's not a diet or exercise solution, but that is a solution that a lot of people will decide that they want to do based on those kind of just little micro bits of education. Like this is actually how our body's changing as we age. So I bake that into what I'm doing. And then we really start to focus on the sensations of the body. So in my primary work, if you were going to come into my studio, every single movement, every single thing that we're doing is where do you feel that in the body? What are you feeling? Put words to it. We start to really develop that vocabulary about the body because the vast majority of women have grown up with what does your body look like? How hot are you? How appealing are you to men? How sexy are you? And there is a phase of life where we actually, our appearance helps us attract a mate. It helps us mate. It helps us have babies if you happen to do that in your life. And what happens is that becomes the entire focal point of a woman, typically from age 12 to 80. But our actual physical appearance really has that quality for, let's say age 15 to maybe 35. So we take that 20-year age period and we blow it up to this is the only thing that women actually, that's our whole relationship to our body. So I really start to shift that into, let's use words about sensation. We're
Mm.
moving, we're doing exercises. Where do you feel it? What are you feeling? Describe that. That sounds so simple. For the vast majority of people, it's incredibly difficult because we don't have that vocabulary. We have a huge vocabulary about how we want to lose weight and look different and be skinny and have no wrinkles. We don't often have a huge vocabulary of, actually, is that sensation at the front of your shoulder, the side of your shoulder? Can you pinpoint exactly where it is and describe, is that a stretching sensation? Is it a twisting sensation? Is it
Mm.
hot? Is it cold? Is it,
Mhm.
what's the color of the sensation, etc. There's 1,000 different kind of platforms there that you can go on and Google different ways to describe body sensations. But that's where we start to really develop that mindful connection to the body. And then from that place, then you can start to be like, what my body feels best doing is. So for me, at this particular moment, because I had a really high stress period during the last couple of years, I feel best when I walk. And so I added that into my routine. Every day I walk. And that is, different than what I did a couple of years ago. It's different than probably what I'll do a couple of years from now. But just having that vocabulary of like, hey, let me dive inside my body. Where's the stress sitting?
Mm.
What is my stress level like? How are my joints and tissues feeling? When I actually exercise, do I feel better or worse? And starting to develop that kind of internal narrative that's actually based on the education of your body, then you can start to make a plan. So there is no such thing in my world as I can make a plan without knowing these other things about you. And so we actually do them concurrently. I don't have a thing where I'm like, you have to have the mindfulness before you can have the program. We do them together because you get that mindfulness through the movement and through articulating it while practicing. But
Mm.
that's kind of what it ends up looking like. So the shift moves away from, there's research that says that by age 12, girls are focused on what their bodies look like, boys are focused on what their body can do.
Can do.
So
Yeah.
actually in middle age, I'm flipping that and focusing on teaching women who have never been taught how to get that vocabulary of what can our body do? What does
Mm.
that look like? And from there, we can develop that internal knowing of, what does a fitness program look like for me today, tomorrow, the day after? Because we shouldn't be doing stuff like, most of the fitness world out there is really focused on like what to do when you have this abundance of energy to burn. You go to the gym, you lift as heavy as you can lift, and you run as fast as you can run. And I don't know a lot of 45 to 55-year-old women who are like, wow, I just had so much energy today. I just needed a place to get rid of that.
No, not
So,
usually.
right. So we've designed a whole program that's actually not for us. It's not like, most women I know are like, I would just love to go to the spa. So that already says to me that you probably need something that's a little bit more gentle. You need something that reduces your stress. You need something that's bring the nervous system down. So, that it's like a more complex answer than like, hey, just stop eating sugar and start running. But it's so satisfying when you can kind of really just shut out all the noise and be like, this is what my body's actually communicating, and I have the
Mm.
language and I own the tools to make that decision for myself.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more empowering. Like there's no one size fits all. It's like me really tuning in to my body, which, if our body also contains the feelings, which I think like we often try to avoid. So avoiding those feelings means that we're also avoiding what's going on in our body. And I know I grew up Gen X, and my mother was always like, it doesn't matter if your back hurts, just keep going.
Yeah.
Like there
Yeah.
was no like paying attention to my body. Nobody cared what my body wanted to say. I was too sensitive if I really tuned into that. But what I'm learning now is that sensitivity that I used to be called all the time is actually my gift,
It is.
because I learned over time, like running just wasn't for me. My joints are not built for running. I mean, I'm not trying to say it's impossible. I just don't like it. And so
Yeah, so don't do
I
it.
don't want to do things that I don't like, and because I know I won't keep them up. It takes so much energy just to talk myself into doing them,
Yeah.
rather than what I'm hearing from you is like, first of all, understanding and educating myself on like this joint pain that I'm having now. Like, oh, what's going on? I already thought like, my joints probably aren't retaining enough water, especially because I had surgery on this shoulder. And like, so understanding that our body shifts and there's not much we can do. And I can really speak to the whole pelvic area shifting because after I had a baby, I thought, there's no way I'm going to be in single digit clothes anymore after like a year and a half. And I gave them away. And don't you know, like after 2 years, my hips came back together and I was like,
Yep.
those are my favorite pants I gave away.
Yep.
So this actually happens. And I didn't know that our hips shift. So when we're seeing that we're wider in our jeans, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting fat or
Nope.
growing big. It just means that our bones are now in a different structure. And I think, I know this is like I don't want to say minor thing, but just a little piece of what you're talking about. But I think that relates to us. Like, once I am educated on how my body is working, what nutrients it might be
Yeah.
losing, I can start focusing on really how my body feels rather than focused on this, how does it look? Because I think that we focus too much on, I mean, at some point, probably we're going to have wrinkles. I mean, it's just, unless you have a really great surgeon, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just a natural thing, no matter how much liquids and, water that we can retain, it's still going to happen.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Last week, because it's fall here now,
Mm.
and I was walking and thinking, we don't nature has no mechanism where it's like, okay, summer's over, now it's fall, but we're going to put out giant lights to pretend that it's still summer, and we're going to paint all the trees to pretend it's still summer. We actually, humans, quite often respond like, I'm so excited it's fall. I get to have the pumpkin spice lattes, and I get to get out the chunky sweaters, and I get to get out the boots. But we don't do that in the autumn of our proverbial life. We actually
Mm.
kind of encourage people to get out the lights and paint the trees. And I actually was wondering, what would this look like if we actually just started celebrating, like, I get the pumpkin spice latte, I get the sweaters, and what is that for our body? And I know that that can kind of wander into a bit of that cliche, but if instead of trying to pretend and trying to paint the trees, what would it look like for you if you were like, this is the gift that I get in this,
Mm.
this is the piece that I get to have? And
Mm.
for me personally, a lot of that actually is just letting go of all the bullshit where it's like, I don't have to do a 21-day program. I actually gained weight during the last few years due to stress. And I spent most of this year doing what would be considered a completely unconventional and probably scientifically inaccurate weight loss technique. I really focused on getting my stress down because I'm like internally, I had a ton of people that are like, well, it's just your age. It's just your age. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's my stress. And so I focused on like getting enough sleep. A lot of us don't
Mm.
get enough sleep. So like 8 hours, you know, I focused on taking vitamins that would actually support stress. So getting those B12 vitamins. I focused on going for walks, in my, like, I'm a fitness instructor. So that's not what we tell people is going to help
Yeah.
them lose weight. And I focused on yin yoga, which again takes the nervous system down. And I'm not quite back to my regular weight, but I'm 3/4 of the way there. And there's no part of like calories in, calories out that I actually ever applied. I didn't go on a diet. I really just focused on like, let's reduce my stress. Let's reduce my stress.
Mm.
And I unsubscribed from email newsletters, things like that. Nobody's talking about that as a weight loss technique, but these were simple, doable, actionable, replicable things that in my day-to-day life I could actually do. And so for me, part of the fall of my life is like, I don't care what somebody told me. I'm going to sort this out in a way that actually feels good to me, because that's one of the things we love about autumn. We get comfortable. And that doesn't mean complacent. That doesn't mean like, okay, this is my weight for the rest of my life, or I'm going to hate my body for the rest of my life. It means settling into something that actually feels good, nourishing, helpful. And I just listed the things I did. That might not be something that resonates with whoever is listening. You might be like, ew, gross. I don't like any of that. But I have done hours and hours and hours of my own practices to be like, I know the doctor just told me something different, or I know this other practitioner or somebody just shamed me and said, well, you're middle-aged now, perimenopause. And I'm like, no, like my body information is saying something different. My body is saying it's stress. It's stress from a really crazy couple of years that were really high stress. And so what can I do about stress? Here is the smallest thing that I can think of that I can do every day without adding stress.
Yeah.
Go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
take a vitamin, go for a walk and be outside. And I just did that over and over and over again. And it doesn't look like a linear path to progression either. There were bumps. There were times when things, and I think that's the other thing, is just letting go of the idea that I'm a robot, where like we live in a culture where if I go to a bookstore, any kind of strategies are quite masculine, actually, to be honest, where they're like, do this and then do it again tomorrow, and it's gonna be exactly
Push it, crush it. It's like, it's so aggressive, and it's like forcing. It's like there's like a force behind it rather than like, so what I'm hearing is that we can spend, especially in the media, we spend so much time projecting what other people are going to see, right? And this external validation of, am I still attractive? Is this and all of those things, rather than really tuning in and saying, like, self-validating. So this is like the same process that I take my clients through, just not through necessarily help.
exercise.
Yeah, and exercise is that, there's tuning in and going, well, what is my body saying? Or what are my feelings saying? Whatever that thing is. And, what actually feels good for me? What can I self-validate that actually feels good for me? And then make these small things. And I think the major thing that my clients focus on that is related is that central nervous system, right? Because whether we're tuning into our body to get into feeling or tuning into our body to see what physically it's telling us, there is a tuning in that has to happen. And we have to start hearing those messages rather than going through that like suffering spiral that we do when we try to avoid it. Like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. And what can I take? And where's my magic pill? I mean, that's where we want to go to when we're on the outside. And I got to tell you, I love the autumn of my life.
Right. Right.
Because like there is a part of me that's like, I'm glad I am not the object of everyone's like vision anymore, right? Like that they don't have to be looking at me, and they don't, like, I don't feel nearly as judged. I'm like, I'm in my autumn. The leaves wrinkle. They dry up and they fall off, and like, and I'm okay with that. The tree is still beautiful when it has no leaves on it, and it's still functional. And so just reminding ourselves, like, really what our body is telling us is more important than what the media is telling us,
Absolutely.
I guess.
And actually, to be honest, even your friends, your doctor, even actually your own brain. So your body has a lot of information. And at the end of it, we've actually been taught to override that again and again and again in 1,000,000,000 different ways. And so it actually, for most people, it's a huge process to actually unwind all of that. And so what's being said here by both you and I, working on the same kinds of concepts in different arenas of specialty, it's simple words. Listen to your body. But the reality is that it takes practice. It takes literal daily getting into the trenches and doing that. and then noticing when you're overriding it, and noticing those shame pieces, and noticing the narratives, and 3/4 of them don't belong to you anyways. There's something that your dad said, or your, somebody said to you at Christmas dinner 27 years ago, or you read it in a magazine, or, you're getting it from a book that you read when you were 15, or whatever it is.
Mm.
And again, that seems like, oh, that would be simple to identify, but really a lot of that is really deeply programmed to the point where we don't even know that it's there. So it takes time. This isn't a thing where you're like, okay, I know that information, I hear these ladies speaking, got it, nailed it. It is, I mean, it's years of working on that, reinforcing it, practicing it, trying it, seeing what fits and what doesn't, and then peeling off those layers. So it doesn't, even everything I said about the body, that doesn't just click into place where you come into my studio and you're like, oh, got it.
I wish it did.
Yeah. So, that's why some of these concepts are so challenging, because they actually sound too simple to be real. But it's because when you actually, it's not about the information. There's no trick, there's no information, there's no hack, there's no stat, there's nothing that is going to replace actually practicing it. And practice actually often takes support. It does take information and knowledge, but you also have to structure your life in order to do that. Like, for me to take a walk every day, I have to put that in my calendar. And whether that's physically on a calendar or actually just in my intellectual calendar, has to be there, because that's the first thing when it comes to exercise that a lot of us will shove out of the way. It's like, well, I don't have time for that.
Right. This other thing happened.
Yeah. And
So
I don't have
now
time
push
to
it
go to
off.
the gym because I don't like going to the gym, but I will find time to put on a podcast and go for a walk because I like it and it's good for my body and I get positive reinforcement and there's things to look at. So there's also things that, you have to create that space for yourself to do the practices, and then you have to create those feedback mechanisms for yourself, and you have to read what your body's saying over and over and over and over and over again, and
Yeah.
get more and more nuanced with it, because those thoughts, I mean, sometimes I get frustrated with myself because I'm like, girl, like, you teach this, come on, get like
Oh, I
like
know.
let's throw it out. And I just self own that, because even with all that I do with clients and all that I do with continuing education and all of the materials I'm taking in, it'll still pop in there.
Yeah. And there's this process that I think people don't give enough credit to, which is slowing down. Because in order to do all of that stuff, like, I have to consciously, mindfully choose, like, hold on, Christina, before we move on to the next thing, like, how are we feeling? And there's a part of me that gets irritated by that, right? My culture trained kind of part of me that's just like, get as much stuff as you can get done, be productive, be efficient, and just keep going. But there's like what I have noticed, no matter what kind of shift I'm trying to make, there is a slowdown. Like, I wrote a book about shift, and it goes exactly how you just said. Like, we get this in the middle of the transformation process, there's this aha moment where it's like, oh, I get it. I really have to be more mindful or conscious or whatever. And then we're like, no problem. I'm just, again, not going to eat sugar ever again. I get it. I'm not supposed to eat sugar, right? Like, so I'm just not going to do that anymore. But then it gets into what I call the F stage, because shift is like an acronym. And that's like whatever F word you want. But I use fortitude and fear, because this is where we have to start making new choices. And in order to make new choices, we have to be mindful that we're even making a choice, because what happens is we just go through our day on all this default mode, right? And making choices that we've always made before. And until we like slow ourselves down, bring our nervous system down, because our nervous system can't be up here when we're trying to make conscious, mindful decisions,
Yeah.
it becomes a lot harder. So really, the first thing that I would say for anybody is like, slow down, start tuning in. What is your body saying to you? And I think that's on the right path. So I know that we could continue to talk about this all day long,
All
because I
day.
think we did last time. But I want people to be able to know where to find you. So can they find you so that they can start getting down to the bottom of what is the functioning piece that's happening here, not necessarily all the aesthetics.
My business name is My Body Couture, which is 3 separate words. It's my my body body couture couture. So I can be found on my website, which is mybodycouture.com, or on the social media platforms. If I'm on the platform, it'll be under My Body Couture.
Yeah, and all those links will be below so that you guys can just easily click on them. But I highly suggest that you follow Janis because I'm going to be, because I love to learn about this stuff and start getting real about what's happening in our bodies rather than just seeing some aesthetic things. And I mean, it hurts me so much when my clients think that their bodies are betraying them or doing something awful like that. So I know that this is a really good resource because that's not what we're focused on. We're focused on what is your body telling you. And it's probably not that you're a jerk, right?
No, end of the day, we actually, we never really think about this, but we're animals. And so, dogs don't fight with their own biology. So putting yourself in a position where if you're 45 years old and you're going to live till 85, where you're fighting your own biology for 40 years, that's a waste of time and energy. And, really to be a productive, happy, functioning person, we don't want to spend our time with these negative, gross narratives, fighting with it all, looking in front of the mirror, hating it. We're not seeing other animals on this planet do that, but we love to do it. We've
So
been trained to
strange,
do
isn't
it.
it?
So, starting now, you can start to soften that. And that's what I would say. It starts with a softening. It doesn't start with we're removing that immediately, but just we're animals. So the more we can actually be in that animal body, and we're not going to win over top of what our animal instincts are saying to us. So let's look at what part of that is trained, what part of that is verbiage that doesn't belong to us, etc. And let's try to soften into that so that we can actually enjoy the experience of our body for the next 40 plus years.
I love that. Thank you for that last thought. I think it's really beautiful. Dog doesn't worry about their own body. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Janis. This has been lovely. I'm sure we'll have you on again because this has been so helpful. I mean, at least to me, and I'm going to be looking forward to learning more about my body so I can be kind and soft with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Are you tuned in and you're like, I wish I had a group of women that I could have these conversations with so I could hear their real lives, how they're experiencing these challenges, how they're getting to the celebrations, how they're building a journey that is more joyful and confident? Well, I got you. I have created a community called the Modern Midlife Mentorship, where we have a modern perspective over what aging and what we look like aging looks like today. It doesn't have to be sitting in a rocking chair. In fact, there are so many women out there doing so many amazing things, as you can hear with my guests on the podcast. But in this modern midlife mentorship, we're going to bring a community together to rethink about what midlife can be like, really dive deep into the topics that are impacting us, like our health, our emotions, our mental health, our relationships, and that big piece of what do I want next for myself. So if you are interested in being in a community, making more connections with women in midlife and getting all the tools you need to really move through the challenges and get to those celebrations, then I want you to click the button below for the Modern Midlife Mentorship. Learn more, reach out if you have any questions, and I would love to see you there. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the episode and that you were able to get something out of it. If that's true, then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, every week this season, I am going to be releasing more. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. It all really helps us get seen by more women so that we can really revolutionize how we see aging and how we see ourselves while we're aging so that we can age more joyfully and confidently. I hope you're gentle with your humanness, especially in midlife. Bye.